We are kicking off our third installment of A Parent's Guide to E-Learning Best Practices. Today we're going to be talking about note-taking and organization as foundational skills to help you reduce stress and anxiety, as a lot of us are starting off the year with distance learning. So what I'd like to do first is introduce the team here today from Accelerate Learning Studio and our approach to e-learning. So from left to right, we have Chris Kim. She is the founder and CEO of Accelerate Learning Studio. She has well over 20 years of experience as an educator and a mentor for youth and guiding college-bound students for the last 10 years. And she's served on the board of several mission-oriented organizations as well. We have China Norwood. She's one of our most experienced academic coaches who trains and directs other coaches as well. And among her many talents and achievements, she has served in the U.S. Navy and has worked in the classrooms, mentoring and tutoring refugees. Jimmy Kim is our co-founder, who has also worked with youth for over the last 20 years. He got his master's degree from Harvard Graduate School of Education, and his education consulting work includes working for Google as an instructional designer. What all these three have in common is they're all super passionate about supporting children and students and their families to provide a holistic support to help them all realize their full potential and dreams. So with that, I'm going to kick it off over to Jimmy, and he's going to talk a little bit about the challenges that families are currently facing in the e-learning environment.
Thank you for joining us. And as we work with students and families, we hear a lot about many different kinds of challenges, but I think we can put a lot of the challenges into these three buckets where the students and parents are really confused because there's really no guide or job training to do the primary work of learning, especially now with the new e-learning. And parents feel like they're thrown into e-learning as either as a choice or as a mandate, but it is causing a lot of stress because parents have to take on a new role as well. And many schools and teachers are also dealing with unpredictability and ambiguity. School year, just by the nature of its cyclical nature, there's a common sense of predictability that teachers are able to build upon year after year, but that is gone now. And it's like really trying to reinvent how we do education. So a lot of schools and teachers feel overwhelmed. At Accelerate, what we try to do is we try to bring, help the parents from being confused to having clarity, and from being stressed to bringing a peace of mind, and helping the schools and everyone from being overwhelmed to being more in control with your own learning. And we bring in learning sciences-based approaches to helping the students to develop good learning habits across these four domains. And as the third part, we're going to talk about the parts that make up the note-taking and organization domain. So let's take a look at how we approach accomplishing these goals. This is a picture of the Bloom's taxonomy of learning. And the lower level is important and essential to building knowledge at higher levels. And there's really no shortcut. You cannot analyze something if you don't really understand it. So knowing where the student is and where the student is struggling is really useful for scaffolding or providing support for the students to figure out why they're having trouble and how can they improve. Click, please. The reason why we do this is because we don't want our students to stay on the lower levels of learning, but we can make use of any learning, including e-learning, to help the students build learning habits and practices that promote and build higher level learning. And this is really our goal, to help the students to become self-directed and independent and have increased confidence and gain more meaningful and better learning for themselves. So let's dive in to talk about note-taking and organization and talk about why that is important. And this is one of those areas that has changed so much since parents, you might remember the pencil and paper, I know, old technology, right? Pencil and paper-based note-taking, because a lot of times students are have readily accessible information at their fingertips, and many times they don't feel like they don't need to take notes. So that's why I think note-taking is one of these things that's so easy to get started, but it's really hard for it to stick as a habit on the students. But it proves to be more important than ever. So let's start with a little quiz. We have working memory, and how many things do you think a mature adult, how many things a mature adult can hold in his or her short-term working memory? And I can keep a list of quite a few things in my mind. So when I ask students this question, and when we work with them, many of them will say like 20, and then like 10, and then they become less confident and say 7. But we used to think those were the actual numbers, but in reality, a lot of the studies show that we can hold just 4 things in our working memory. And with students with developing brain maturity or learning challenges, this number is actually less. And that's why alleviating the load or the tax on the working memory is so important to learning and processing information. And that's really at the heart of why we're talking about note-taking. So if you look at the next slide, if I can give you an analogy, it's like trying to hold 4 tennis balls. And 4 tennis balls, your hands are really full. Can you hold 5? Yes, temporarily you could kind of hold 5, but when that happens, one of the balls drop out. So we tell the kids the surest way to forget something is to tell yourself you're gonna remember it. And so our brains have learned to be very efficient though, even though we can only hold 4 things. Our brains have become efficient by chunking the information. So what we do is we take individual steps and we group them or chunk them into kind of automating the process. So for example, when my kids were little, I would help them walk through how to brush teeth. First, you do this, second, you do that, and so on. But now, when they got older, all we have to do is say, hey, let's brush teeth. And they know how to do all those steps and because they've chunked how to do brushing teeth. And we can also do chunks of chunks because now we say, hey guys, did you do your morning routine? And now they know that morning routine includes making their beds, changing, brushing their teeth, and eating breakfast, and so on. And talking about ideal world because my kids sometimes get it, sometimes don't. So it is a habit building challenge. So where do your notes come from? And I'm taking a little bit more traditional school approach here, but notes come from textbooks, ebooks, or other books, class or lecture notes and handouts and so on, projects and other sources. And the key is to try to have the notes in one place so that we're not switch tasking. Last week we talked about multitasking as a myth and how switching from one task to another requires extra effort and attention. So try to keep everything in one place. So if you have really good notes, you have everything in one place. But the most important thing is what do you do with these notes? Because a lot of the times, some of our students just take notes and then they never look at it again. But good notes can help you get better organized. In order for you to organize your notes effectively, you have to learn how to analyze and evaluate what is essential information and how they are related to one another. And that's why we group note-taking and organization together as related skills. And coincidentally, these skills that we write here are also, they also coincide with Bloom's taxonomy level, as you can see here. So that's why it's important for helping the students to develop these skills so that they can start practicing the higher level learning and thinking processes. So when you take good notes and when you start developing these skills, what are some of the skills that you need and that you need to develop to have good notes? And by using it, in turn, you develop these skills. And they are listening skills and reading skills and so many others. So if we're gonna take notes in class or online lecture, then we need to have active listening. And active listening also requires a bit of socio-emotional skills as well, which we'll talk about next week. Reading skill obviously is important because our primary information do come from either watching videos, or reading. So reading proficiency is also important as a base, but also knowing what's important and what's not important. So one of the things that we train the students, for example, when they're reading textbook is, how do you know what you're reading is important? A lot of times when we look at some of the older students' notes, when they're starting to develop this, some students, they just write a few keywords. And then later on, they look at it and they have a hard time figuring out or remembering what that was about. On the other hand, a lot of times students feel like they have to copy the entire book because they're afraid that what if I miss something? So having the kids really evaluate what's important is important. And in addition to that, focusing, writing, and a lot of different skills are developed and are needed. Let's take a look at writing skills because it is such an important skill. And reading and understanding are really essential and foundational to writing. And that's why, note-taking is actually a practice into learning how to write better as well, because it's helping you to really narrow down what is important and to evaluate the information that you're reading. But understanding and writing are really difficult, especially for younger students. And that's why it's important to introduce writing in such a way, instead of a term paper or high pressure paper, introducing writing while lowering the barrier so that they can have easier access to it and just writing freely without fear, and without fear of making mistakes or getting bad grades, etc. But a way to give them ownership and choice, and at the same time, really good feedback that they can use to continue improving on their writing and keep making it better and better and better with every iteration. And those are the foundational approach that we have to some of our writing programs as well. And lastly, it's important to getting kids exposed to different kinds of writing as well, because different types of writing do build many different skills, and skills are required. My little one, he is in 3rd grade right now, in his 2nd week of e-learning. He came, it's my 5th grader. He came and complained, we're doing personal narrative again. For the last 4 years, that's all we've been doing, although that's not true. I think kids are also looking for creative outlets as well. So giving them many opportunities and kind of different ways of expressing themselves is good for them as well. So with that foundation, I want to hand off to Chris and China to really talk about how we support students with note-taking and organization in our classes, and also try to tie that in with actionable steps that you as parents can take to support your kids at home.
Thank you, Jimmy. So in our learning studio, when we work with our students, we identify them as a note-taking and organizations. And this is one of the fun ones because there's some elements that very easy fix. And students usually say, I don't know what to do. I need help. But we found a quick and easy trick that we can do with the students, and which we're going to share today. So we're going to start with the first one, managing your supplies. So this is, it sounds like very straightforward, simple, but China, would you chime in on how we support students in our learning studio?
Sure, happy to. Managing supplies is, well, being prepared is really the first thing that we talk about. After our initial greeting and saying hello, saying how things are going, and then we prompt our students to start completing their self-evaluation. Beyond their name and if they're on time or not, the first thing we ask them to assess is if they are prepared for class. Do you have the supplies that you need? In our setting, we ask them specifically to answer if they have their notebook for Accelerate. So we encourage them to have a notebook dedicated specifically to what they're doing with us. In this case, it's Accelerate. In the home environment, it would be for whatever class they're working in. A writing utensil, a pencil, headphones if they need to have those. Not all of them will use them. And a fully charged device. So these are the key supplies that our students need to be successful in their online session. And we start out by asking them, do they have it? And hopefully over time, most of them get into the habit of knowing, oh, I need to have this ready to go. I'm going to have to answer these questions. So it's one of those things where the more you practice it, being prepared before you start, the better you'll be. The more often you'll remember to be prepared and to have a successful session or learning experience in whatever environment you're in. Yes.
Yeah, so if you could look at the next slide, that it starts at home. I'm sorry, it starts the night before. If you can prepare these things, especially charging the device the night before, it will be great. Again, having a consistent place. We talked about consistency last week. And so a consistent place. So park them in a consistent place where all the chargers, headphone, and other learning materials are easily accessible. And you might think, the little headphone here and charger pencil might be just one little thing, but we find it all the time that, oh yeah, I need to go grab this, and then become a major source of distraction. So having it all together the night before they even begin is really important. We have in our learning studio something called daily success plan, and then there a check mark they have to do for readiness score for themselves. Here at home, I made a little example of a list of things that my kids need to prepare the night before with a check mark. So having this visual, so you could say, oh, you got to prepare this, this, and this, and that, and you expect that they will remember all of those. But if you can have something visual like this and then have them to check it off, that will be actually a great visual cue for them to remember those little little details. So so those and if you sorry, at the end of this webinar, I think we will give the daily success plan as a gift for you, so you can use that as a part of the supplies that you use. The next one is instructions and planning. So, so China, would you explain about this and then how we use at home? I'm sorry,
Sure.
Yeah.
So here we have this description: reads and understands instructions given thoroughly. That's key. And is able to think through approaching and solving a problem before attempting it. This is really important. We have many students, I mean, just in general, and even, you know, with my own kids, they see some numbers there on the problem and they just want to jump in. They see numbers, they see a multiplication sign, and it's like, oh, okay, I know what I need to do. I've got to multiply. In our studio, we try to observe. I mean, we do teach them these skills, you know, and say, okay, this is what you need to be successful. You have to be prepared. You need to read directions carefully. You need to watch any learn videos or sample problems. You need to take notes. You need to ask questions. So they have all these lists of things that they need to learn to do. And as they grow and develop, these items kind of happen at a different pace. I mean, sometimes they're better at, you know, getting their supplies, but not so good at the instructions and planning part. So we reinforce this concept that you don't just jump right into answering a problem just because you see numbers and a multiplication sign. You have to read the instructions. There's always information there. Experience is often the best teacher. Sometimes they rush in anyway and they're like, nope, I know what to do. They multiply, they put in their answer, and it's a mixed number and it's wrong. And they'll say, how can that be wrong? I know my multiplication is right. I'm good at math. And I'll say, well, did you read the instructions? Yeah, I read it. It said to multiply. Well, what else did it say? How about you go back and read that question out loud? And then in reading the directions, they might find that it said, oh, submit your answer as an improper fraction. And then the moment that I love, oh, the O happens. Now, so you see, So this is why we have to read the instructions thoroughly. So we reinforce this, reading it before you jump in. Think through what steps you need, but to solve the problem, what am I going to need to do? What function am I going to need to do? Make sure your pen and paper is ready to go. Hopefully that's already done. And then attempt the problem. And then if it's wrong, we can talk about what to do later. But this part is key. Chris?
Yes, I love that moment when they ask question, and so we do this at the studio, but I think we share our trick that we use here with our students, and we talk about this quite often in our training sessions with our coaches as well. So have the kids to read the question out loud entirely. Again, that's how it helps them to thoroughly to read and understand the questions. So reading out loud will force them to slow down and focus better. This is an advantage that you can take it at home, because when you're in school, they're supposed to zip and not to distract other kids. But here, we train the students read out loud enough that they can hear themselves, but not to distract our other students. But at home, you feel free to read out loud, and then you can hear what they're doing. And not only when you're reading it together with them, but reading it by themselves, you hear that all the time in the middle of the sentence, and that will also have the students develop the habit of reading through the entire question instead of just jumping in and skip the instructions altogether. So I always say that, oh, it's Miss Chris' trick, or it's our coach's trick. We have this magic, and let's read the questions together. So that's the magic word. Let's read the questions together instead of sometimes. So when you want to go a little bit deeper, challenge yourself and your student at home, you can have from the beginning, have all the questions read out loud. But if that doesn't do the trick, it helps them and say, let's read it together, and reading it together 80-90% of the time, that really tells us that students are really not reading the instruction, whether the questions or the answer options, they just don't read anymore. So that really helps them to slow down, read, and then by modeling that, students understand that by reading these the instructions and questions and answers, that you can get a lot of cues out of it. Try to read the instructions twice. So, having them to read out loud, it will take an extra effort. They will resist, and they will say like, oh, it's not, I already did. We hear that all the time. But I say, like, let's read it together so that I can understand and I can help you. And so, parents at home can use that trick as well. And if that still doesn't help the student, this is another extra step you can go. Have the students to explain how they understood the question. And in the beginning, they'll resist. They'll say like, I don't know, you tell me. I asked for your help. You're the one who needs to tell me how to understand this question. But just, dissect it a little bit, slow down word by word, and, just give them a little time to digest. And just, in this, fast-paced world, that students just busy to move on from the one question to another, and don't have the time enough to slow down and read. So that will be another extra challenge that I can ask for parents to try. The biggest one I have to say is try to not to focus on the right answer. So one of the reasons why students are so on just not reading the questions, but to see the answer choices, then try to find this right answer. And jokingly and not jokingly, I always say, especially in math, I mean, even, language arts and reading too, I always say the answers are in the question. And so instead of, just try to find the right answer from the answer choices, from the multiple choice questions, try to focus on the process of getting to the answer. So when my kids are young, they used to ask me, "Mommy, what is 60 times 3?" And I would not give them the answer. I would ask them, "Do you know how to do 60 times 3?" And then I say, "Then do the times 10." And that by doing that, you teach them how to process these questions. So you break it down and have them to focus on the process of it, and then that will help them to slow down as well. So the next one is utilizing support. So again, so our students are now in this age that they're so easy. It's so passive type of learning. So they want the support and the things to be just given to them, but they don't, properly seek those helps. So China will share us how, in our learning studios, we encourage the students to seek those resources first.
So going back to, the example of a student that doesn't know what to do. Maybe they jumped right in. They didn't read first, and it's not correct. We go back and, have them, as Chris said, read together, read it out loud, read it again. Okay, nothing's clicking. I don't know what to do. Maybe they've just hit a wall, and they want to shut down a little bit. I don't know what else to do. In the programs that we use, and I'm certain probably in many of the programs that the schools will use at home as well, there's always some sort of support that's available. Internally here, some of our programs have a little question mark, and I like to call it the magic question mark. Some of them are just learn videos, and there's a little button that says learn. So we guide them to say, well, let's find out how you can how you can learn more. What's available to you? Well, there's this question mark button. I'll say, well, push the magic question mark button. Let's see what happens. And we do get sometimes the student that will just click it and say, I don't understand any. It didn't help at all. And I'll say, well, did you read what's there? So one part is just directing them to get comfortable with accessing what we call the help tools or the learn tools in whatever form they might be. Others are getting them to actually pay attention to what's there. So if it's just something that you read, you click it and it gives you additional instructions, we'll say, go back, let's read that carefully, and why don't you take some notes about what you're seeing? There's a sample problem there. Why don't you work on that sample problem? See if you can work it out. See if you can understand from there. If it's a video, then I'll say, go ahead, pop in your headphones, listen to that video. I love to encourage them to work through any sample problems that were there. There's a feeling of accomplishment when you're working through at the same time and then you arrive at the answer and then there it is. Oh, okay. It's like, okay, I get it now. That's all right, perfect. Let's go back now and then see if you can apply that to the question that you're working on. So there is, at least for us, and again, I'm sure at home, there's always some sort of support available. And again, it might be a video. Maybe it's some sort of little explanatory sample problem or question mark. But sometimes I'll guide them and say, well, sometimes you have the support. A lot of them have written down formulas or some kind of conversion factor somewhere, and I'll say sometimes you have it yourself. You're just not aware of it. You're upset. Let's take some deep breaths and think about all of the tools that you have available to solve this problem. And sometimes they have it themselves. They say, oh yeah, I wrote that down. I know how to convert this. Okay, go ahead and find that. Highlight passages while you're reading. If it's something that you're reading, you can use your little annotate function and underline and highlight things. So there are lots of supports available for students to use. The key is really just getting them to learn how to use them and to get them to that point where they access these tools on their own when they hit a wall.
So you might be wondering, we said we're gonna, share some insights about note-taking. And so far, we haven't actually touched upon anything about actual note-taking. So you might be wondering why we're talking about and why we put this under this. As you can hear that or see that a lot of the foundational work, skill building, what we're trying to have the students to prepare is to know when and how to use the resources. It's not just about note taking, but a lot of times they just take notes and they forget about it. Like China said, yes, I have written it down, but if you never go back and look at it, if you don't, seek those helps or seek those resources on your own, if you're not trained and prepared for that, then no amount of information and notes available is not going to help your child. So these are the tools to equip them to be able to use these things. So in our first week, we talked about the digital divide isn't about who has the tools. Now, with one-to-one initiatives, everyone has the device. Almost everyone has an access to the e-learning through our school districts or private softwares and things. But it's about how the tools are being used, and that's the core of what we're training here and what we're trying to help you to train your child. So for this item, how to utilizing support, that I will go to the second point first. So as China said, a lot of these programs do have built-in tools, so know when it's appropriate time to use them and not to just how to use them. So yes, clicking those question marks and videos and things like that. But to include that when you have trouble, after reading questions twice or out loud and do understand what the question's asking, if you still know how to answer and haven't really come up with a strategy or linking those concepts into actual questions and answers, then these are the tools there to kind of remind them how to connect those concepts and the problems together. So use them. And also, now the school has, the teachers or the aides in the classroom just specifically using these tools together. So create a troubleshooting guide for the students. So even, as an adult, if we do have some sort of a list of things or in a writing somewhere that what else, can I do? So again, having the list of things to do will alleviate, the taxing on, the working memory we talked about earlier. And it will really help them to clearly see that without getting frustrated when the student is facing some of these difficult, challenging problems, what tools they can access, including the built-in resources, but also teachers and the resource personnel from school, or even parents, and when is the right time to ask for those help. So if you want to go a little bit deeper than just that, we talked about in the first webinar series about the goal setting and reflection time, and this is a perfect time to reflect and review some of these things. And some of the troubles and challenging situations or challenging questions are actually coming from whether the concept or the content is difficult to follow and understand, go through, or it could be a simple mistake as grammars, or not writing down the right symbols, or the calculation mistakes. So evaluating those challenges and how to navigate that, include that as your reflection time. Again, you will receive our gift of the daily success plan, and in there are some questions already already built in that you can kind of start off as a template, working with your students to kind of assess at the end of the day what kind of troubles they had, and how you can discuss, use that as a tool, how to improve the next time when you face a similar situation. This will not only allow the time to reflect what's in the past, but also have an action plan going forward. But this will also help them to have the safety of making mistakes. So it is really imperative for the students to learn and grow, and this is a part of metacognition, a process that you as a student yourself, without someone else telling you, that recognize what my action is causing this result, and how can I do things differently to make a different result. And without making that mistakes, it's almost impossible to learn those things. So encourage them to make mistakes. It's okay. Excuse me. It's okay to make mistakes, but do focus that making mistakes is a part of the learning process, and try to not to repeat. What can we do not to repeat the same mistakes? Or if you do have challenging situations or challenging contents, what resources and when they should seek those resources when they need it. So there's a lot of heavy but interesting things with this part, using resources, but I hope that our tools that we provide will help you to understand that as well. Okay. The next part, we talked about working step by step that helps them alleviating using of freeing up the working memory, and China will also explain how we use that in our classroom.
Thank you, Chris. Working step by step. I know I keep saying, oh, this is so important. This is very important. That is very important. Because the truth is, it's all important. All of these different steps have to work together in order to have a successful session, whether you're with us at Accelerate or whether your students working at home, even in sports. All of these different areas, music, they all have to come together in order to be successful. So I will say it again. Working step by step and using scratch paper is so important. A lot of students feel overly confident. They're confident in their math skills. I know this stuff. I don't need to write it down. And in fact, it becomes a challenge for them. I don't want to write anything down. I just want the challenge of being able to pop in that answer and see that it's correct. And that feels good. Like I did something. I did it in my head. I didn't need any extra help. But we try to encourage them that it's, writing things down isn't, that you're requiring any kind of extra help. And in fact, there's nothing wrong with getting help. But writing down your work helps you to break down this problem into action, into steps that you can see. And if something happens and your answer happens to be wrong, and as Chris mentioned, it's okay to be wrong, we can go back and see where you went wrong. If everything happens in your head, there's no way to go back and see what happened. You can think it through, but you can't see it, and that's a lot less effective. So we encourage them, use scratch paper. Sometimes there's on-screen tools too. You can annotate right on the screen if you want to, and kind of share that with us. They can share it with their instructor as well to write out what they're thinking. And that frees up your mind. You don't have to calculate everything internally. You can see it, and that makes it so much better. Additionally, we reinforce them to think about what goes into this as well. So if we're trying to figure out an area formula, and it's like, oh, the area is 72, and the width is 6, and the student may be like, oh, yeah, okay, I think it's this or that. And I'll say, well, write it down. Do you know the formula for area? Yeah, I know what it is. Well, write it down. Okay. And we'll say, what is it? Well, area equals length times width. Write it down. Do I have to? Yes, you have to. Write it down. It helps. So you write, A equals L times W, and I'll say, okay, you know the area. They told you it's 72. Yeah, write that in. What did they tell you? It's 5. Oh, and there it is. Oh, I love O. I love to. Oh, I get it now. I get it now. So that little bit of practice is so important. If they had done that all in their head and the answer was wrong, they might again suddenly hit that wall. Oh, it's wrong. I know it's right. It should have. The system's wrong. I love hearing that. The system's wrong. Okay. If you write it down step by step, you kind of avoid those type of the system's wrong type of outbursts. So writing it down, again, helps you see it. You're popping in the formulas. You can be more confident. And if there's a mistake there, usually seeing it, it becomes glaring. If you wrote down 12 times 5 is 60, but you're solid in multiplication, your brain might say, oh, wait, that's wrong. Try again. We know it's not 60, it's 72. So that's how we enforce it here at Accelerate. We push them to write things down, to work on it step by step, not just random numbers, but everything that goes into it, to free them up. And we do respect the fact that, yes, we do have some kids that are super confident in math, but even for those students, it's always important to be able to work step by step. Chris?
Yeah, so it has become a lot more important in the Common Core type of questions and instructions, because nowadays there are usually multiple steps in word-based problems, and there are many parts. So they will ask you to part A and then part B to come to the answer to part C. So if you, even if you can do, the calculation well in A or B, but then putting all together to answer the C part. So it becomes very important that, especially even higher the grade, and we see this in our curriculum, that 5th grade and above, it has become like imperative to write down these steps to make sure not only that you do the right part to get to the problem, but when, not if, when they get they found that their answers are wrong, they will learn again how to reflect and how to go back where, in step by step, looking for what step of to get to that answer where I got those wrong. And a lot of times we'll see the pattern. Some students, they know how to do certain problems, but their calculation oftentimes gets wrong. Other type of consistent mistake could be they just don't know how to approach the problem, how to translate some words into equations. So then our coaches will help the students to do the training in specifically in those areas. So without writing those down, it is almost impossible to help them how and what. In a bigger picture, we also do SAT and ACT training here at the partner company, More Than Scores and Tests, and it is within that standardized test environment that we encourage the students actually write on that piece of paper on actually the test itself to do the calculation. And so once you go to high school, they will realize that writing down those steps are really, really important. And this is the beginning of taking a longer term. So if you don't do A, B, and C, it's harder to move on to, the understanding, recognizing words and paragraphs and the whole story. So, I used to say to the parents, like, take the notes out of the backpack, put it on the desk, and, write down things. We have to instruct them step by step, but it's a progress for them to make, that they remember that they will need to bring the notes, they will need to write these things down, and don't assume. So that's the next point. So we talked about using the ancient technology of pencil and paper here already a few times earlier, but now with the screen and stylus and touch screen, that's fine too. but just make a habit of writing things down. If it's not math, about math, writing down the problem solution step by step. For language arts, social science, and sciences, just writing down the important topics, the titles, and then in bold items, have them to just write it down. That's the next point. That figure out what's important to take notes on. It's hard for them to distinguish earlier without going trainings, but the easiest way of doing it is write down the titles first, and then whatever is associated with it, the content will help them to train them in a habit of doing the note taking. If you want to go a little bit further, and then also there are some students have like troubles doing just really just pencil and paper or any writing utensils to do that. There are some learning challenges that certain students come with. Then for those cases, have the students again tell you back how they understood certain content. So the first step will be having them coming out of their head and then verbally break it down to the thought process. And we've helped some students actually just recording it again and then re-listening to what they said about the content itself. Or now there's a lot of very affordable and free recording device or voice typing tools that have the students actually, retell the understanding of the contents or the problems, and have those scribing tools to type it for the student for you, and then reread it. It will help them to understand better. So it kind of touches upon your listening and speaking and writing all together, and then they can see visually that those notes, how they understood, is actually helping them to break it down to smaller granular level to understand bigger items. The last one is actually taking useful notes. So finally, we're talking about the useful notes and the ways that we help the students in our studio and how you can help your student at home.
So last time, so important. So important to have notes to refer back to. There's so much learning, at least here, I know I can speak for us here at Accelerate, so much learning that goes on both in math and in language arts. And we don't expect them to keep it all in their heads in any given session. We know that this takes time. It takes time, it takes practice, and that's what we work on. And as we're looking to help students get this information down in a way that it sticks and it becomes part of just your permanent knowledge bank, taking notes is just a very important step. And not only taking notes, but taking down notes that are legible, that they can refer back to, that they know how to find. All of these things, again, have to come together. We guide them to have a dedicated notebook just for their Accelerate lessons. And if they're taking both subjects, some have 2 notebooks or some have one that they've split just into 2 subjects. We don't want your notes on, clauses to be mixed in with some note about converting grams. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's not going to help you find it easily. So we guide them to have their notes broken out by subject. We guide them to take notes that are legible. Make sure you can read those notes. They're useless to you if you don't understand what you were talking about. And they have to be effective notes. Just writing down 12 times 6 is 72, well, that's just a multiplication table. That doesn't help you understand the formula for area. So as Chris mentioned, having a subject heading at the top of your notes that says, formula for area, or just area. It doesn't have to be, super detailed, but enough that it's clear that you can go back and refer to them. I like to guide students as well, Accelerate, to put certain types of notes in a place that's easily accessible. So I'll say, if this is some kind of conversion factor you're going to need in the future, why don't you try using the front inside flap of your notebook or the back cover, because that way you can easily find it. You don't have to sit and go flipping through and wait. I know I put it, it's here somewhere. I'll say, this is an important thing to know. Put it on the inside cover or the back cover. You can always go and find it there. You know where it is. And also we talk about just the importance of not, it might sound silly, but I'll tell them, don't skip pages. Don't just open your notebook randomly and write something in the middle because it's a blank page. Try to have a process for going, try to just kind of work in order so that you can go back a few pages. If I covered this last time I was here. Okay, so then my notes for this are probably going to be on the page before. Random notes thrown somewhere hodgepodge inside of the notebook, again, aren't going to be very useful. So we try to just train them to take neat, legible notes and to have an organized system for those notes so that they can refer back to them. And students that learn to do this find that it's just much easier for them. They can be successful and they feel confident. And now there's also that sense of accomplishment, like, oh, I didn't even need to click that question mark button because I did this already. I did it last week. I know where to find it, and it's written in my own handwriting, and it just feels great. Like I was able to find this answer on my own, and I wrote it. So there's also that extra boost of confidence that happens from taking good notes, and then that motivates you to keep doing it. So that's how we help them here in the studio, and I'll leave it to Chris to tell you how your students can apply these skills at home.
Yes, I'm just, kind of repeating, your trick. There's a lot of things that we mentioned here that you can easily just do it at home, copy or repeat what we do here. So keep the notes in one place. You can use, if your student is still using physical piece of paper, have them to actually use, we like using actually a binder system or a notebook that have a, sections divided into 2 or 3 so that you can keep one note in one subject, another note, another subject, and then maybe use the third one as a scratch paper. The consistency is the key. Going back to the note organization, you can actually do on a digital organization now, so they can take the notes on OneNote or some of these softwares, and or Google Drive. A lot of school districts are using Google as a learning management tool. So they will have a lot of Google Docs, and once you go into their Drive, you will see all these individual files that has no connection to how they are organized, and then they easily just lose. It's kind of like having a piece of paper all over the places and you don't know how to organize them. So so the organization and actual taking notes has a lot of the impact together, and so help them to set up folders for each of these Google files or other files, to label them correctly, and then have them to be able to see the consistency and the patterns that emerge out of those notes. So also China mentioned that once you write down those important things, it is easier for them to be able to see the pattern, what's important, and being able to refer it later. And that's such an important connection that your child can make between the notes they're taking and then the content they're seeing, and how they grow and progress from that process. So if a child can learn one concept and write down, and then go to the next concept that's based on the first one, and if they remember and saying that, oh, that it has something to do with the ones that I already learned, but if I don't know how to do that correctly, the student can go back and make the reference and be able to refresh their memories or relearn or remind themselves to go to master that first concept before they reach out to the second concept. So for a student being able to see that pattern and recognize it and go back to the notes, for them to be able to do that, they should learn how to organize these things or the notes and the difference between the scratch paper and actual notes for certain concepts. That's what's important. If you want to go a little bit deeper and challenge yourself and your student, again, use the reflection time. It takes a little bit of discipline for the parents to do a step ahead to support students to organize and review the notes, but help them to periodically refer to materials as needed, and then point out, yes, you've already taken that notes. I've seen you taking that notes. Can we go and find it? And you can, as China mentioned, that you can see, and as they practice more and it becomes a part of their habit, you will see the confidence building and see how and why it's important to take these notes and how to effectively use them for future reference. You will see the really light bulb turning moments really visibly. And again, earlier we talked about the chunking and how the students understand not only the individual knowledge and concepts, but they are actually they started making sense of something bigger, higher, and more. So the next chart will kind of show that how the retention, that how the forgetting curve is, if you spend so much more time over the year, over time, that you forget. But then when you actually look at the next chart, that once you learn something and be able to, you will forget. We all forget, right? Forget. But then when you go and review, and that's why there's a homework, there's a review, and the notes. That's why it's so important for them to refer and go back and learn how to use these notes, and that it will come right back up. And then you will again forget, but then slowly you can see that the retention is there. And even in the marketing principle, they say you should show at least 7 times before your consumer recognize your brand name. And same thing, I think you have to see certain many times to encounter the concepts and review and all that until it actually finally becomes your own. So as a parent, if you understand this concept and help them to not only what to take notes, but how to use them, how to refer them, and it provide the consistency through reflection time, goal setting time, and managing their the time and the notes and resources. It will really help. You will slowly see that the things will come into places, and you will find a lot more peace and preparedness going into this remote learning environment. So that is all that we can share for today about note-taking in organization. At this time, I would love to open for any questions from our audience. I will invite Jimmy or China if you would like to come in and share any other tips that you want to share.
Sure. I have one to add. So one of the kind of our understanding when we say note-taking is we tend to think of it as we do it once and then we refer to it. So it's kind of seen as a one-time activity. But please know that notes are also a working document. So if you find that you had to refer back to something and that wasn't on your notes, then that is something really good to know to put into your notes. So keep adding to it, especially if you're taking digital notes, it's okay to take things out of it, highlight it. So it's really a repository of, like almost your second brain, where you're keeping track of what you need. So keep adding to it and keep refining it as you need. Another frequent question we get is like, what are some of the tools that you use? And a lot of times I think parents are or students default to whatever the school uses. So Notability is on the iPad that students use a lot. So that is something that, where you can pull up PDFs, write in it, and then save it into a folder system. So that is a really good tool. More and more schools are starting to use Google Drive. So then now you're dealing again with loose paper or loose files. So organization is very important. But having one place to go back to, again, is really the key, and doing it consistently.
What would you recommend to students who, when now we're...
Sorry, Christian, we're having a hard time hearing you. We could kind of hear you. Oh, there you go.
How about now? Is this better?
Much better, thanks.
Okay. I was asking, what would you recommend for note taking when, let's say a student is making annotations on the screen, and then do those annotations disappear? And then they're also working with a notebook. So how do you recommend balancing on-screen annotations with on my paper notebook as well?
It kind of depends on what you are doing. So I'm assuming the on-screen annotation typically has to do with book notes, right? When you're reading something. And also we actually teach our students to use on-screen annotation to help understand the question. So for example, when the students are reading a question, we say, if you had to highlight what the question is asking, like a keyword or a phrase, what would that be? And we have them just go and highlight all these questions, whether it's a math question where it says, find the area of figure A, right? So area, figure A are something that you would highlight or circle. And same thing with a reading question where it says, what was John's underlying motivation for acting this way? So motivation or underlying, those are the keys. So you can sometimes highlight things and kind of use it to help support your learning at the moment, but not necessarily for long-term. Now, in terms of long-term retention, the things that you highlight, saying that it's important, are what would end up in your notebook, right? And also one of the tricks that we teach the students is to take the title of a section, turn that into a question. So for example, if the subject is, gosh, what would be a good example? The economic reasons why the North and the South fought during the American Civil War. Then you change that into a question. What were the economic reasons for the war? And then you're looking for the answers as you're reading it. So, and whatever helps you to answer that question is what needs to be in your notes, right? So those are paper and pencil ways to help you. There are actually really useful tools that I've used when I was studying. There are tools, I forgot the name of it, but tools that help you to, once you highlight in the PDF or whatever electronic document, you can actually have that exported, send you as, it copies in all the text, pulls it out, and send it to you as an email or a text document. So that helped me to organize it. But that is something I really don't recommend too much for the younger students, because actually writing and typing on your own, it reinforces your learning and memory, strengthens it. So the act of actually writing it down and act of typing it yourself is really helpful rather than copy pasting it, because that's a very passive thing to do and it really doesn't stick so well.
If I can add to that, and to address Christian's point, I do allow students to annotate in an Accelerate session right on their screen, but it's not something that I recommend as a long-term solution. This is something that I usually ask them to do. Specifically, if they're reading a passage, I'll say, oh, let's underline this particular passage. Just look at the question and the answers, and then as you're reading and you think you found those answers, you can, annotate or highlight. When it comes to math, and we'll see this happen as students work in a remote environment, it works well when you're trying to show your teacher what you did. It might be a little bit more difficult to just hold up your notebook and maybe you're trying to center it on the camera. It's not so easy, so a student might annotate on the screen to show their steps to their instructor, just so that we're both looking at the same thing. However, I do encourage them, once we have that answer, to, as Jimmy mentioned also, to then get those steps into your notebook so that you can use it later on. A lot of the systems won't hold on to any annotation that you've put on the screen, anything you've written, so that information will be lost if it's not transferred into a notebook. So definitely annotation or writing on the screen is fine, but for information you need to refer back to, definitely it should be in your notebook.
Well,
awesome, thank you, China.
To help the parents a little bit, give you a flavor of some of the support that we provide around note taking, we wanted to provide this freebie to help the students learn vocabulary words. And I know learning vocabulary is not something that's quote unquote popular anymore, and for good reasons. I mean, just blindly learning a list of words and terms is not very helpful, but really learning words you don't know, especially academic words, from the context of where you learn it is very important. So we have a template based out of the Freire model of note-taking that we use to help the students really learn deeply the word or term from the context of where they learn. With some examples, a template that you can print out and use. So we'll send it to all the participants today as a freebie along with the learning plan.
Awesome. And just to add on that, if you're on Facebook Live or watching this replay, just give us a comment and we'll make sure we get that resource to you as well. So thank you all for those who joined us. This concludes our third installment. Next week, at the same time, next Saturday, we'll be going over social emotional learning. So that'll be just overcoming a lot of the emotional roller coasters that comes with struggling through homework. And so a lot of tips and techniques on how to positively navigate through when your students are struggling. So stay tuned for that, and thank you so much for joining us today.